$129. Valid through 9/2. Program subject to terms and conditions. Details at Lowe's.com/terms. Subject to change while supplies last. Selection varies by location.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
A surprising outcome in the WNBA last night. The LA Sparks, the team with the WNBA's worst record, beat the team with the best record, the New York Liberty. The Sparks held on for a 6-point win at Crypto.com to snap a 7-game losing streak. They also snapped the Liberty's 8-game winning streak. Forward Darica Hamby led the Sparks with 21 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, and 3 steals. The Dodgers got home runs from Shohei Ohtani and Teoscar Hernandez to hold off Baltimore last night. The Angels lost at Detroit. Their losing streak is now at 7. ESPN's popular First Take Morning Show will be broadcasting live from 3 HBCU campuses. September 20th at Howard University, the alma mater of Vice President Kamala Harris. October 11th at Tennessee State, the alma mater of Oprah Winfrey. And November 8th at Morehouse College, the alma mater of filmmaker Spike Lee. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here's what happens when you advertise on KBLA Talk 1580.
3, possibly 4 weeks ago, I heard an advertisement on your radio station from a company called Grid Solar. I would love to have that phone number so I can reach out to them with reference to solar panels being installed on my property.
Our listeners are aware and engaged, but more than that, they are loyal. When they hear empowering messages that uplift their community and help them live better lives, they respond. No medium reaches this coveted black audience like KBLA Talk 1580. So, hit us up today at smb@kbla1580.com and let us help you connect with our loyal listeners. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black. Money to bud.
That's Michael Jackson, and we are celebrating Michael Jackson on what would have been his 66th birthday today. So happy birthday to Michael Jackson and his precious memory, but he sounds as good as ever. In this hour, as promised, a conversation with award-winning environmental journalist, filmmaker, and author Ben Raines about the latest developments and the fate that is of Clotilda, the last known U.S. slave ship, and whether it should be left beneath the sea or recovered and preserved for history. Clotilda, The Return Home, is now streaming on Hulu and Nat Geo TV on Disney+. I'm going to give you a little taste of the trailer for this piece, and then we'll commence our conversation with Ben Raines.
This is an opportunity to reckon. Descendants fulfilling the request of their ancestors. It's a ritual, something to honor, to heal. Oh my God. Bring him home!
So Ben Raines wrote the book about Clotilda a little while ago. The book is called The Last Slave Ship, the true story of how Clotilda was found, her descendants, and an extraordinary reckoning. We'll get Ben in just a second here to tell us the backstory to the book and what this current debate is all about. But I invited him back on the program because this is really a fascinating story about the last known slave ship off the coast of Alabama, essentially, and how they discovered it, and what this debate is all about why, this debate rather, about whether or not they should bring it up, leave it there, preserve it for history. I'm not exactly sure how this debate plays itself out, but Ben Raines, of course, has written about this beautifully and is at the epicenter of this conversation. So let's bring him up. let's talk to him. And we'll try to fix this. I think Ben is not where he ought to be, but let's just try this and see if we can hear him. Okay, Ben, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. It's good. First of all, it's good to hear your voice. Good to have you on. How are you today, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. So we just played a trailer, some of the sound for Clotilda: The Return Home, which is now streaming, as I said, on Hulu and Nat Geo TV on Disney Plus. And I wanted, obviously spend this hour having you share with this audience where we are in this conversation about this slave ship and whether or not it ought to be brought up, left there. We'll get to that a little bit later in the conversation. But let's just start with the backstory. For those who've not heard about this slave ship, we got time here. Give me the backstory of this slave ship, and we'll jump from there.
Well, the Clotilda was it started with a bet. Let me get away from this noise here. In 1860, and it was a rich guy from Mobile. And it had been illegal already to bring people in to the country to enslave them since 1808. And so this guy made a bet with a bunch of other rich folks that he could do it because he wanted to thumb his nose at the federal government. And so he sent a ship to Africa with 27 pounds of gold to buy as many people as he could. And the people arrived here, and the government was looking for them, so they had to hide the ship and pretend they hadn't done it. So they smuggled the people into the woods and for 2 weeks, and then they burned and sunk the ship to hide it. And it remained hidden for the next 160 years. And it became a local legend, partly because the people who were on the ship, after the Civil War ended, they'd only been in America for 5 years. And so they came together and bought land from their former enslavers and built a town, Africa Town, which is still here. And the people, their descendants, still live in the town. So it's a really unique story in the historical record, unlike anything else we have.
Tell me more about how we know that this was, in fact, the last slave ship.
Well, for a number of reasons. One, it happened right before the Civil War. And so we have other documented ships that were brought in illegally like that. But they all predated the Clotilda. And the Civil War started just a few months after the Clotilda arrived. In fact, there was a ship caught 3 weeks before the Clotilda came in, and the captain of that ship was hung by Abraham Lincoln. He was the only person ever hung for slavery, for bringing people into the country illegally. So there are no other ships that claim to have arrived after the Clotilda. And of course, these were all illegal things, so people would have kept quiet about them. But with the Clotilda, and then the war happening, and then the people surviving after the war, and they were very young when they were brought here, between 12 and 30 years old. And so they lived into the 1930s. And so they were interviewed in the modern era multiple times and talked about what happened to them, the man who captured them, who paid for them rather, the men who enslaved them. So their story is incredibly well documented, and most famously by Zora Neale Hurston, who wrote Barracoon. Yeah. And it was about Cujo Lewis, who was on the Clotilda. So it is the most well documented slave ship journey ever. Beginning with the people telling the story of their lives in Africa before they were captured. Yeah. And it moves all the way through. They tell the stories of being captured, of what their lives were like before they were captured. They describe the Middle Passage and then being enslaved. All first-person accounts. I
want to get back to some of those first-person accounts a little bit later in this conversation, because you're right. It is amazing that we have these stories on the record, and we only have them because it happened to be the Clotilda, the last slave ship. And to Ben's point, some of these folk lived into their 30s, and so we do have their first-person accounts on the record. When we come forward, though, before I get back to the Clotilda, I want to have Ben tell us more about that story, which fascinates me, I suspect you as well, about this person that Abraham Lincoln hung. You think of all the slave trading that went on, and if I heard Ben correctly, only one person was ever hung for all this illegal slave trading, and Abraham Lincoln made that happen. I want to hear more about that part before we get to the Clotilda. Our guest in this hour, glad to have him, is Ben Raines.
From California to the Carolinas, everybody's listening to Tavis. More when we come forward. Tavis Smiley's new book, The Covenant with Black America, 20 years later, is now on sale everywhere. This classic text shot to #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list almost 2 decades ago. If you have the original book, you will surely want to get this 20th anniversary edition with powerful new contributions from today's leading voices. This 20th anniversary edition presents a compelling blend of historical insights and contemporary urgency in this critical and unprecedented election year. Get your copy of The Covenant with Black America 20 years later today.
Make a move into a home of your own. With City National Bank's Ladder Up Home Loan Grant, you could receive up to $20,000 that you never need to pay back. Use it toward your down payment, save on closing costs, or to buy down your mortgage rate. Find out more at cnb.com/ladderuphome. City National, here for every stage of the journey. Property must be in a qualifying market in California, New York, or New Jersey. Additional terms and conditions apply. Not all applicants will qualify. Terms are subject to change without notice. City National Bank is an equal housing lender. Member FDIC. NMLS number 536994.
Support comes from Getty, presenting Memnon, a world premiere theatrical event under the stars. Memnon tells the tale of a powerful Ethiopian king who fights alongside Troy during the city's darkest hour. This epic Greek myth has been overlooked for over a millennium. Until now. Memnon is co-produced by the Classical Theater of Harlem, Thursdays through Saturdays this September at the Getty Villa Museum. Tickets are available now at getty.edu.
Eggs are a staple in our diets, and there's only one egg with more delicious farm fresh taste plus superior nutrition. Eggland's Best. With more vitamins, including 6 times more vitamin D and 10 times more vitamin E, plus 25% less saturated fat than ordinary eggs. Available in so many delicious varieties: classic, cage-free, and organic. Eggland's Best. Better taste, better nutrition, better eggs.
Why choose a Sleep Number smart bed?
Can I make my side softer?
Can I make my side firmer whenever I want?
Can we sleep cooler?
Sleep Number does that. Cools up to 8 times faster and lets you choose your ideal comfort on either side. 94% of Sleep Number smart sleepers report better sleep. JD Power ranks Sleep Number #1 in customer satisfaction with mattresses purchased in-store. And now, during our biggest sale of the year, save 50% on the Sleep Number limited edition smart bed. Limited time. For JD Power 2023 award information, visit jdpower.com/awards. To find a store near you, visit sleepnumber.com.
Ugh, I've been feeling so sluggish. I'm just kind of blah.
Been there. That's why I take Align yogurt-coated probiotic fruit bites.
But I suppose they taste blah.
Actually, they taste delicious. It's an apple blueberry flavored center covered in a yogurt coating and is infused with probiotics to help support a healthy gut. They come 5 in a pouch. I just toss one in my bag and go.
Toss one in my bag?
Get your own.
New Align yogurt-coated probiotic fruit bites from the makers of the #1 doctor-recommended probiotic brand. Find them in the digestive care aisle.
The smarter way to clean your floors. It's time to make the swap. Swiffer Power Mop.
Introducing the new Swiffer Power Mop, the all-in-one tool that gives you a mop and bucket clean in half the time. The solution's built right in, so no heavy bucket, and the pad has hundreds of scrubbing strips to get deep into grout. Don't mop harder, mop smarter.
Swiffer Power Mop. Swiffer Power Mop.
Less monologue, more dialogue. Tavis Smiley continues right now.
Tavis Smiley as we continue to celebrate the birthday of one Michael Joseph Jackson. In this hour, we continue our conversation with Ben Raines, who is author of the book The Last Slave Ship, the true story of how Clotilda was found, her descendants, and an extraordinary reckoning. There is a documentary now that is streaming on Hulu and Nat Geo TV on Disney Plus. It's called Clotilda: The Return Home. So this story is getting more and more exposure, and there's some issues here that we'll unpack with Ben over the course of this hour that need to be unpacked about the truth and who discovered what, et cetera, these things always get a little tricky. We'll let Ben unpack that as we move through the hour. Put a pin in that for the moment. But he is he is the author of the book, The Last Slave Ship, and I'm pleased to have him on. Before I get back to the Clotilda, Ben, as I said a moment ago, you teased us with this story about the one person, the only person, as you put it, who was actually held accountable for all this illegal slave trade, hung by Abraham Lincoln. Tell me more, sir.
Yeah, it was a captain named Nathaniel Gordon, and he was caught just off the Florida Keys as he was returning to America. And he was caught in 1860 and hung in 1861. And so Lincoln, every president between Thomas Jefferson, who signed the law in 1808, making it illegal to import people to enslave them, there are 9 U.S. presidents. These are our founding fathers, from Jefferson to Lincoln. Every one of them pardoned convicted slavers, people who were caught red-handed on ships with people they were bringing to enslave, except Lincoln. He was the first one to actually execute someone for it. And it was quite a big national story. And, you know, the interesting thing about all those other people pardoning them is all those other presidents were slave owners. They enslaved people themselves. And I think that's why none of them could bring themselves to put someone to death for doing basically what they were doing.
Yeah, it does give you a different way, though, of thinking about and considering these founding fathers. For all the monuments in Washington, all the books, all the documentaries, all the adulation and adoration of these founders, the founding documents that they inscribed. Of course, those founding documents, as you know, were pro-slavery at their writing. That's a whole other conversation for another day. But this point that you make now that many people did not know, I think we knew that they were all slave holders. I don't know that we knew that they pardoned slave traders, Ben.
I certainly didn't know before I wrote the book. And it was one of those eye-opening moments of, you know, I guess it just brings it home to you, you know, that we were a nation built on the backs of enslaved people in just about every way. And you know, now with this critical race theory debate going on, this is exactly the kind of history that people are trying to hide.
All right, but I'm glad we have you here to uncover the history that they're trying to hide, specifically about the Clotilda. So let me just again, we have the hour. We can stretch out and make this rich as I want it to be, or as rich as I want it to be. So let me start with this. Speaking of slave traders, tell me about the guy or the guys, you tell me, who owned Clotilda. Who were these slave runners on this ship specifically?
So the ship was built by a guy named William Foster, and he lived in a rooming house when he built Clotilda. You know, some of the history books, some of the early history books say that the Clotilda was purpose-built for this trip to Africa. It's not true. It was built 5 years before, and basically it was a two-masted schooner, 87 feet long. So think of it, this was an 18-wheeler of the 1800s. This was how goods moved around America. You know, we didn't have the interstate system. We didn't even have roads connecting many places. So things moved on the water in ships like this. And the ship was built in the shipyard of a guy named Timothy Mayer, who was a wealthy plantation owner with his brothers, his two brothers. Between them, they owned 9 steamboats. And they had come to Alabama as Alabama was the frontier. So they showed up in 1835, shortly after Andrew Jackson captured and chased all the Indians out of Alabama. You know, the Trail of Tears we always hear about, those Indians that were marched to Arkansas, they came from Alabama. And so Timothy Mayer shows up here with his brothers. They have no money. They start as deckhands on steamboats. Flash forward 30 years, and they're all what would be the equivalent today of millionaires. And they've made their money hauling cotton from the plantations down to the Port of Mobile on steamboats. And to set what this world was like, think antebellum, Gone with the Wind. Mobile was one of the most cosmopolitan places in America at the time. The 3 biggest ports in the country were New York, New Orleans, and Mobile. And so Timothy Mayer had lots and lots of spending money. And so, as I mentioned, he wanted to thumb his nose at the government and prove he could import people right under the federal government's noses, basically. And so he hired his neighbor, Foster, who lived in this rooming house next door to Timothy Mayer's plantation, because the Clotilda was the fastest ship in Mobile. And Foster was an expert shipbuilder, and he had done things to make the ship even faster. He clad the hull in a sheath of copper to keep barnacles and algae from growing on it that would slow it down as it moved through the water. He made extra tall masts so they could fly more sails so it was faster. And this turned out to be, as far as the success of their criminal enterprise, the right move. And basically, it's like the old moonshiners had the fastest cars and could outrun the cops. The Clotilda could outrun the slave squadron vessels, rather, the English slave squadron vessels. They were kind of patrolling the world's waters, and finally embarrassed America into adding some ships to the effort because they kept catching Americans illegally smuggling slaves. So America finally got involved in trying to capture some of these slave ships.
Let me ask you a couple of questions about that. How robust was the effort to really catch these slave traders? I mean, you mentioned earlier that all of our initial presidents, our founding presidents, pardoned all these guys. We'll come back to that. Those who were in fact caught. But give me some sense of how robust, how aggressive this patrol was in really trying to catch these slave traders. Was that real?
The English version was. So England outlawed slavery in, I think, 1835, much earlier than we did. And instead of having a civil war, they paid every plantation owner, who were mostly in the Caribbean, they paid them for each person who was enslaved by them. They gave them a cash settlement. And it would have amounted to about $15 billion in today's money, the amount they spent. But they avoided a war, and they got out of the business of slavery. So the Victoria and Albert, the Victorian age, is Queen Victoria, and her husband, Prince Albert, in his first public speech after they got married, his first public speech was about the evils of slavery and how it was an assignment from God to end slavery on earth. And so at the highest level, the British Navy was committed to this anti-slaving squadron mission. And so they would go around the world. They were, and try and interdict slavers. The Clotilda was actually chased on its way to Africa by a slave squadron vessel. And then on its way back, it was chased several times, including while it was anchored off modern-day Benin at the port of Dahomey, Ouida, which was where everybody on the Clotilda was purchased. The Captain Foster, in his journals about the trip, tells the story of being double-crossed by the Dahomeyans. They had taken his money and made him wait 8 days to get the captives. And as they were loading them onto his ship, onto the Clotilda, 2 British steamships in the slaving squadron appeared around this point, bearing down on the Clotilda. So they actually had to pull the anchor and leave without all the people that Foster had paid for. So that's why he ended up with 110, but he had paid for 125.
Oh, what a pity! What a pity, Ben! Yeah. What a pity!
Yeah, well, and so they take off and they put up the big sails, and within 4 hours, the Clotilda had outrun the slaving squadron.
Yeah,
but it was a real effort. The British Navy was, they were capturing ships right and left, and if it was an American ship, they weren't allowed to board it because of treaties between America and England.
Right.
But they would escort it and make sure that it didn't go to America. So it was a real effort, and the British deserve credit for leading the world in ending slavery.
Give me some sense of what part of Africa you mentioned this particular story about Benin, but give me a sense of what part of Africa the Clotilda was actually capturing these Africans and bringing them to slavery.
So the Clotilda went to the port of Ouida, which was the port for the Dahoman Empire. The Dahoman Empire was actually one of the biggest enslavers of people on earth. They're responsible, according to historians, for about 1/3 of all people who were enslaved in the Americas for capturing them. So this one tribe, over the course of 300 years, captured about 4 million of the people who were enslaved.
Wow.
And it's a small tribe, and it was notorious because when they attacked a kingdom, they only took people who were of the best age to sell. So people between about 12 and about 30, and they killed everybody younger and everybody older, leaving behind these ghost towns all around their empire because they were afraid of revenge and people attacking them and stuff. And so that was just their the way they attacked. And you and I have spoken before about The Woman King, the movie.
Sure.
And that was actually about the Dahomeyans.
Mm-hmm.
And that movie, to me, it's still, I can't believe it got made, because it makes out that the Dahomeyans were somehow these heroes, when really, if this were the story of World War II and the genocide committed by the Nazis, that movie's like making Hitler the hero. It's just crazy.
Well, that's Hollywood for you. And there were a whole lot of people. I was not one of them, but there were a whole lot of people celebrating that movie, The Woman King, when it came out. But it doesn't necessarily track the true story that Ben Raines is sharing with us now. And this is always the hard part of this conversation for me, because it's always hard as an African American to wrap my brain around. I'm not stuck on stupid or naive about it, but it's always hard to wrap my brain being around the fact that there were Africans who were complicit, obviously, in selling other Africans into slavery. That's always the hard part for me. But it is what it is.
And it would have to be that way.
Yeah.
I went to public school in the South, and I was taught that white men went to Africa and threw nets over black people and brought them back to enslave them, which is just preposterous.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these people were warriors. They were armed with guns, and it just, nothing could be further from the truth. So yeah, there was a huge component on the African side. For instance, the Dahomeyans, they industrialized the business of capturing the tribes that surrounded them.
Yep.
And,
I'm sorry. Let me ask you, I'm watching my timer. I got about 2 minutes here. We'll continue when we come forward. I want to just close the circle on this if I can. And then when we come forward, I'll talk about the last slave ship and its last journey to Alabama, and where that slave ship is now, what this debate is all about whether or not to leave it in the sea or bring it up and preserve it for history. We'll get to that part on the backside of this hour. But in the 2 minutes I have left here right now, tell me more about the pressure that was applied to get the U.S. finally, our founding fathers as slaveholders notwithstanding, our founding fathers pardoning slave traders notwithstanding. Tell me a bit more in 90 seconds about the pressure that was, in fact, eventually successfully applied to the U.S. to become part of that patrol.
It was one of those things where America had formally ended the slave trade, supposedly, but you were still allowed to enslave people in America. And the English kept pointing out the contradiction there and saying, it's no better to, just because you're not capturing them from Africa, this is still a vile thing you're doing. And this was a raging debate in America. Of course, it led to the Civil War. So obviously, many people were committed, as Lincoln was committed to ending it. But one of the things that people don't really understand about the South was how few people actually had slaves.
Mm-hmm.
They were the very wealthy. There were, for instance, Winston County, Alabama, famously did not secede from the Union during the Civil War, and it was because there was only one person in the whole county who owned any slaves, and he had 8 of them. There were 8 enslaved people in the county. So there were huge pockets in the South. There was another county in Mississippi that didn't secede because people, they were very sympathetic to the enslaved people and not sympathetic to the rich people,
Nope.
So it's a complicated story, but so what I'm trying to get at is you had very poor religious people who were against slavery, even in the South.
Yeah.
It was just this small cabal of ultra wealthy
people,
influential people doing, and they were who were perpetuating it.
No, I get it. Ben's book is called The Last Slave Ship, The True Story of How Clotilda Was Found, Her Descendants, and an Extraordinary Reckoning. The documentary, now streaming on Hulu and Nat Geo TV on Disney Plus, is called Clotilda, The Return Home. When we come forward, we'll talk about the last errand, the last journey of this particular slave ship, Clotilda, to Alabama, what happened to the ship once it got there, and the debate again raging right now about whether or not the ship, there's some archaeologists who are arguing one thing, Ben Raines sees it another way. We'll talk about that debate and more when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
This is getting good. Yeah, man. Tavis Smiley continues when we come forward.
Paid for by government.com. Did you know? The United States Mint has issued a new Morgan silver dollar coin in proof condition for the first time. Not only that, they are also minted in 99.9% pure silver for the first time ever in history. Coin experts are calling this an amazing opportunity for anyone that knows the enduring popularity of Morgans. But you must hurry. Only 400,000 of these legal tender silver dollars were issued. These first ever Morgan silver dollars are brand new with stunning mirror-like finish, minted by the iconic San Francisco Mint. Call now and you're guaranteed a new first ever 99.9% pure silver proof Morgan dollar. To learn more, call 1-800-973-9717. If you order now, you will receive a free coin collector bonus pack, a $25 value, free with every order. Call 1-800-973-9717 now to secure your new Morgan silver dollars before they are gone. That's 1-800-973-9717.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Kroger is admitting to raising prices far higher than necessary to fight inflation. The company's top pricing executive testified that the company had raised its prices significantly higher than cost inflation, specifically with milk and eggs. Updated COVID-19 vaccines are now available and being recommended in light of a summer surge in COVID cases. The CDC is saying that adults and children ages 6 months and up should get the newly formulated COVID shot. The first trailer is being released for Tyler Perry's 688. The film tells the story of the first and only Black Women's Army Corps unit to serve overseas during World War II. The film stars African-American actress Kerry Washington. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Lowe's Rewards members, they've got exclusive Labor Day doorbuster deals just for you. Right now, save $100 on a 10-foot animatronic skeleton, now just $129. Valid through 9/2. Program subject to terms and conditions. Details at Lowe's.com/terms. Subject to change while supplies last. Selection varies by location.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
A surprising outcome in the WNBA last night. The LA Sparks, the team with the WNBA's worst record, beat the team with the best record, the New York Liberty. The Sparks held on for a 6-point win at Crypto.com to snap a 7-game losing streak. They also snapped the Liberty's 8-game winning streak. Forward Darica Hamby led the Sparks with 21 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, and 3 steals. The Dodgers got home runs from Shohei Ohtani and Teoscar Hernandez to hold off Baltimore last night. The Angels lost at Detroit. Their losing streak is now at 7. ESPN's popular First Take Morning Show will be broadcasting live from 3 HBCU campuses. September 20th at Howard University, the alma mater of Vice President Kamala Harris. October 11th at Tennessee State, the alma mater of Oprah Winfrey. And November 8th at Morehouse College, the alma mater of filmmaker Spike Lee. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach. Is someone you love struggling with addiction and mental illness? Is improving your family's health important? Want to leave a legacy that your family can grow? Are you ready to enhance your perception of life experiences? Then wake up weekends at 7 a.m. with Urban Family Focus and get the wisdom, opportunity, resources, and motivation to live your best life. Join the conversation on Urban Family Focus Saturday and Sunday at 7 a.m.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Tavis is under attack. I can't get his radio station on my transistor. I'm getting the Asian station that he's right around, but they're not letting KBLA 1580 come in. I'm not getting the black man. So let Tavis know he's under attack. Cyber attack, racist attack, fascist attack, but he's under attack. And they doing something to disrupt his radio station so they won't get the truth out to us.
Hey, it's Tavis. We appreciate all that love, let me tell you, because we may very well be under attack on all sides. Just because you don't believe in conspiracy theories don't mean they ain't after you. But in reality, sometimes stuff happens with the signal from the studio to the tower, which sends our programming to your car, home, office, or your transistor radio. But when you download the KBLA 1580 app, the sound is clear as a bell. All day, all night, anywhere in the world. From Los Angeles to Lagos. So, we love all of our listeners, no matter how you hear us. But when you download the KBLA 1580 app and hear that richness, you'll wonder why you didn't do it sooner. But don't take my word for it. Download the KBLA 1580 app right now. I'm Tavis Smiley, and I approve this message.
Always night pads are designed for a perfect night's sleep. So you can do your bear hugging a pillow thing, your free-falling starfish thing, your burritoed in a blanket with the AC blasting thing. While Always night pads with rapid dry do there, we've got your back with fast absorbency and up to 10 hours of protection thing. So while your period's doing its own thing, Always lets you do your sleep thing. Shop for Always in-store or online, wherever you get your pads.
More honesty than you can handle. More empowerment than you can imagine. You're tuned in to Tavis Smiley.
Never can say goodbye. No, 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 no. Never can say goodbye. Even though the pain and heartache seem to follow me wherever I go. Though I tried to hide my feelings, they always seem to show. Then you tried to say you're leaving me, and I always have to say no. Tell me
So, this is the barroom brawl. Who do you take? Big Michael Jackson or Little Michael Jackson? Yeah, I got Little Michael Jackson. I mean, Michael was a bad boy his whole career. It's hard. It's an impossible question. I'm just acting silly. But you cannot fade. You cannot fade the prodigy, Michael Jackson. It kills me every time I hear that Negro. He wore that thing out, man. Turn it up, Miles. Turn it up. Yeah, you can't fade that. You can't fade it, man. Anyway, it's Michael Jackson's birthday. He would be 66 were he alive today. And so we are celebrating the life and legacy, the rich artistic genius of Michael Joseph Jackson. We continue our conversation now with Ben Raines. His book is called The Last Slave Ship, the true story of how Clotilda was found, her descendants, and an extraordinary reckoning. The book is the enlightening true story of the last ship to carry enslaved people to America, the remarkable town its survivors founded after emancipation, and the complicated legacy that their descendants carry with them to this very day by the journalists who discovered the ship's remains. There's great debate about that, Ben. Now I'm reading stories of people trying to take credit for your discovery. What do you make of that?
Well, it started as soon as the discovery was announced, and it's some really prominent people, archaeologists, and even National Geographic tried to claim credit. So that has been one of the strangest aspects of the discovery. I'm really proud to have played this role in this historical thing, but the shenanigans by the Alabama Historical Commission, the archaeologists, National Geographic have really been stunning, and it continues to this day. I keep catching these people trying to claim they found the ship.
Yeah. What say you? We'll get to the story again about the last journey of this ship in a moment here. But what say you about this debate now that some archaeologists are engaged in about whether or not the ship ought to be brought up? It allows me, it kind of forces me to jump ahead of where I want to go. We'll go back in a second, so forgive me for this. But since you mentioned the archaeologists, there is again this conversation, this debate about whether or not the ship ought to be brought up from where it is now, protected, preserved, perhaps restored in some sort of way for history. What's your take on that debate? And then we'll go backwards.
Well, so from the very moment I discovered the ship, my position has been that it should be on display in a world-class museum in Africatown, and that it would be the national monument to the enslaved, which we don't have in America. And what more powerful way could you tell the entire history of enslavement than having the last ship that brought enslaved people here and telling the story of the lives of the people who were on it? You know, there's no other story like it where we can do that. So to get at why, you know, what you're referencing, a report came out 2 weeks ago that has been many years in the making, and it was commissioned by the Alabama Historical Commission, and it was a team of archaeologists who were supposed to study the condition of the ship and offer thoughts about preserving it, putting it on display, etc. And from the very start, the state of Alabama has been pushing what they call preserving in situ, which means leaving the ship underwater to rot away forever, you know, hiding the ship forever. So when this report came out 2 weeks ago, it goes even further. It not only suggests preserving in situ, it actually suggests burying the ship entirely under mud, hiding it completely and its history. They say this would preserve, the ship would last longer because worms and bacteria wouldn't be eating at it and vandals couldn't destroy it. Well, putting it in a museum accomplishes all of those things, and then millions can see this chilling piece of our history and confront it for themselves. You know, the archaeologists at the big meeting where they announced it talked about how it was the most moving experience of their lives, diving through the racks where the people were held. And then in the same meeting, they say, well, the responsible thing to do is leave it underwater and bury it entirely under mud. No, the responsible thing to do is let the rest of the world have that experience the archaeologists had confronting the history. So I am fully against leaving the ship underwater.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off, Ben. I'm sorry about that. That's okay. To what extent do you think this, to my mind, nonsensical suggestion, I agree with you, to bury the ship under mud, to leave it there, to what extent do you think that decision or that suggestion by these archaeologists is connected to America wanting to bury its head in the sand, as it were, about the slave trade?
Well, the state of Alabama has ownership of the Clotilda because it was found in state waters, and that's just the way the law works. The governor of Alabama in 2021 came out against critical race theory in a tweet. She tweeted, "We have banned critical race theory in Alabama. We are going to teach our children to read and write, not hate." And hate was in all caps. So I think that tells us the state's position. They don't want to show this history. The state Alabama is already actively trying to hide history. You know, critical race theory, that whole argument, it's just about hiding history. So I think what you said, burying their head in the sand, in the mud, I mean, they literally are trying to bury this history under mud and keep it from where people could see it. They've talked about, we could make a Pearl Harbor-like memorial where people can go up there and get off a boat and stand on a concrete pier over the wreck. Well, the difference is at Pearl Harbor, you can see the wreck 70 feet underwater in crystal clear water. Here, you'd have to take a boat trip round trip would take about 3 hours, and the river is always muddy brown. You can't see down 6 inches. So it's just a way of keeping the wreck hidden away, making it very inaccessible and hard to get to. You know, in my book, I quote a man named Lamar Howard, who says, "When I went to the Lorraine Motel and saw where they killed Dr. King, I cried." That's exactly what's going to happen to people when they see this ship on display in a museum.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel. And I can't understand any argument to do anything other than that. There are ships this old on display all over the world. At the big meeting where they announced the report, the lead archaeologist, this guy Jim Delgado, tried to talk people out of putting it on display, saying, well, it would cost, $10 to $25 million. You'd have to take the ship entirely apart piece by piece to do the preservation work, and it would take 10 years probably. That's the same with every ship that's on display.
Yeah, I was going to say. So
that's not
exactly. Yes. How's it different than any other ship, right, man?
Yeah, exactly. And the state, Alabama, before I found the Clotilda, they weren't looking for the Clotilda. Alabama spent its money trying to find 2 Confederate battleships sunk near Mobile, which they found.
Wow.
They never said it would be impossible to put them on display.
Nope.
Only the Clotilda.
No, I hear your point loud and clear. Loud and clear. When we come forward, I'm going to give Ben some time, although my time is getting away from me, to tell us the story of the last ship and its last journey, how it ended up where it is underwater. We'll let Ben do that part of the story. Let's share that part when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Generous listening. Charitable listening. It's why everybody wants to talk to Tavis. The conversation continues when we come forward.
We ask seniors how to prevent Medicare scams.
My best advice, if you get a phone call, do not talk to the person. These people are well trained. Don't talk to them.
They don't know me. They're just trying to scam me.
Don't be fooled. Hang up. Just hang up.
Never give out your Medicare number.
They're going to get your number to put in a false claim.
If I get a call from someone, I don't pick up the phone, and should I pick up the phone and they ask for information, then I hang up.
How do you detect Medicare fraud?
Just like I check my credit card statements, I check my Medicare statements monthly.
Scammers can get a hold of your number, order medical devices through your account, and you're not even going to know about it if you don't look at your statement.
Check your statement every month.
If you get your statement and you see something that you know you did not have done, you report it.
Call your Senior Medicare Patrol.
To report Medicare fraud, call the Senior Medicare Patrol at 855-613-7080.
Tavis Smiley's new book, The Covenant with Black America, 20 years later, is now on sale everywhere. This classic text shot to #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list almost 2 decades ago. If you have the original book, you will surely want to get this 20th anniversary edition with powerful new contributions from today's leading voices. This 20th anniversary edition presents a compelling blend of historical insights and contemporary urgency in this critical and unprecedented election year. Get your copy of The Covenant with Black America 20 years later today.
The smarter way to clean your floors. It's time to make the swap. Swiffer Power Mop.
Introducing the new Swiffer Power Mop, the all-in-one tool that gives you a mop and bucket clean in half the time. The solution's built right in, so no heavy bucket, and the pad has hundreds of scrubbing strips to get deep into grout. Don't mop harder, mop smarter.
Swiffer Power Mop. Swiffer Power Mop.
Lowe's knows Labor Day calls for big savings. My Lowe's Rewards members get 3 bags of premium 2 cubic foot color mulch for $10. Lowe's knows home improvement. Valid through 9/4 while supplies last. Program subject to terms and conditions. Details at lowes.com/terms. Subject to change. Excludes Alaska and Hawaii.
Have you noticed the hype around retinol lately? It's all over my social media. But did you know you can get retinol in a body wash? Amazing, right? Olay Retinol Body Wash is packed with moisturizing vitamin B3 complex plus retinol to transform dry skin to visibly renewed in just 14 days. Try it the next time you shower and see the difference for yourself with Olay Retinol Body Wash for visibly renewed skin in just 14 days. And try Olay Retinol 24 Body Lotion.
Helping to make you the most knowledgeable person in your circle of friends. This is Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley and the amazing storyteller, Ben Raines. I rarely have had guests who tell stories as well as Ben does. He knows the story because he wrote the story because he discovered the ship. It's called the Clotilda. His book, once again, is called The Last Slave Ship, the true story of how Clotilda was found, her descendants, and an extraordinary reckoning. My time is getting tired of me, Ben. Tell me about this last slave ship, specifically this last journey.
You mean the trip from Africa?
Yes.
Well, let's talk about the last part of the journey,
Yes.
which was when they arrived back in America.
Mm-hmm.
So coming into Mobile Bay, which is where the city of Mobile is, there were 2 federal forts at the mouth of the bay, one on the east side and one on the west side. So the ship stayed 20 miles offshore, so it wouldn't be seen due to the curvature of the earth, and actually came in Mississippi and snuck around the island where the federal forts are. It came in Mississippi. So then our conspirators came down in a steamboat, which was the first engine the Africans on board the Clotilda had ever heard. And they actually discussed in the hold that they thought it was a gigantic swarm of bees. And then the ship, they towed the Clotilda at night up into this giant swamp here, the Mobile-Tensaw Delta. So imagine a 400,000 acre swamp with alligators and it's a very big swamp.
Mm-hmm.
Towed it up there, transferred all the people onto another steamboat, and then lit the Clotilda on fire and burned it to hide the ship because they were afraid the government was going to catch them, because the government, Timothy Mayer, the guy that paid for all of this, had been bragging since the day the Clotilda left Alabama for Africa about what he was doing. And so the federal government knew, and they were watching him at his house to catch him red-handed for this crime that you could be hung for. So that was why they decided to burn the ship.
Mm-hmm.
They were once again trying to disappear it, because a slave ship was a horrible, stinking thing. There was no hiding its purpose, if they were to be captured. Interestingly, that night, when they put all the captives onto a steamboat, none of the mayors would drive the steamboat. Instead, they had a Cherokee Indian they enslaved named James Dennison drive it. They had taught him how to drive steamboats because they didn't want to be caught on a steamboat with all these captives. And that choice they made, having Dennison drive it, that actually helped me find the ship, because James Dennison, who was enslaved by the mayors, then married one of the African women. And he was friends with the other Africans for the rest of their lives, for decades and decades. And so he told Cujo Lewis and the others where they burned the Clotilda. And so when I was doing my historical research, I read in a newspaper interview that Cujo gave when he was 80 years old to a newspaper from another town. He said they burned it at a place called 12 Mile Island.
Mm-hmm.
And I know right where that island is because I know the swamp real well. And so here I had one of the victims of this crime telling me where the ship was. And I knew he would know because James Dennison was there that night and knew where they burned the ship. So it's kind of a fascinating wrinkle. So the ship was burned to hide it, and it stayed that way for 160 years. People looked for it beginning the day after it was burned. The federal government was looking for it. And up into the 2000s, there was a historian in Mobile who spent tens of thousands of dollars of his own money looking for the ship, unsuccessfully.
Ben Raines to the rescue, and now we know where the ship is. When we come forward in our remaining moments with Ben, I want to ask him, given that it was burned to try to hide it, what is the condition of the ship as best we know underwater all of these years? And then we'll close with his chilling account of some of these first-person accounts of those who survived into the 1930s. That's how we'll wrap this out with Ben Raines, author of the book, The Last Slave Ship, when we come forward.
Why does Tavis say, when we come forward? Because he's not going back. And you don't have to go back either. Forward ever, backward never. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
You know where you want to go in life, and City National Bank can help. City National knows the dedication it takes to build your vision for the future into a reality, and our team is here for you. We have a wide range of options to help, from personal savings accounts to interest-bearing money market savings accounts and more, all designed to help you get where you want to go. City National, here for every stage of the journey. Learn more at cnb.com. City National Bank is a subsidiary of Royal Bank of Canada, member FDIC.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 believes in community empowerment. LA's 99 neighborhood councils form the grassroots level of the Los Angeles city government. The system was created to connect LA's diverse communities to City Hall. While neighborhood council board members are volunteers, they are also public officials elected to office by the members of their community. Neighborhood councils advocate on issues like homelessness, housing, land use, emergency preparedness, public safety, parks, transportation, and sustainability. They also provide local expertise on the delivery of city services to their various communities. Neighborhood councils are open to participation by anyone who is a part of the fabric of daily life in said community. This includes those who live, work, or own property or a business. If you are interested in stepping up to join your local neighborhood council, visit www.empowerla.org. That's empowerla.org. It's time to think globally, but act locally. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Watch out! You got me!
galaxy is safe once again.
In the pretend universe, kids play with pretend guns. In the real world, it's up to us to make sure they don't get their hands on a real gun. If you have a gun in the house, keep it locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Safe gun storage saves lives. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
The smarter way to clean your floors. It's time to make the swap. Swiffer Power Mop.
Introducing the new Swiffer Power Mop, the all-in-one tool that gives you a mop and bucket clean in half the time. The solution's built right in, so no heavy bucket, and the pad has hundreds of scrubbing strips to get deep into grout. Don't mop harder, mop smarter.
Swiffer Power Mop. Swiffer Power Mop.
Made fresh daily in Leimert Park, Los Angeles, California. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley and Ben Raines. I got 4 minutes left in this conversation. There are those who believe that the Clotilda is a decayed crime scene that should stay underwater. Ben Raines disagrees, and frankly, so do I. Ben, in these 3.5 minutes I have left here, tell me about the condition of this ship as we know it right now, and I want to close with some thoughts on these first-person accounts.
Well, I'm one of the few people who has actually touched the ship, and I can tell you the wood is strong. It's cypress wood. Much of it is buried. The ship was hit by another ship at some point in the last 160 years. So the back of the ship is kind of wrecked.
Mm-hmm.
And the fire destroyed the upper deck. So where you would stand if you're standing on the ship to look out at the ocean, that's gone. And that's an important structural element for a ship. You know, it ties the sides together so they don't just collapse outward.
Right.
So it's missing some key structural elements, but the ship itself is there. The sides of the ship, you know, I can see it on my depth finder machines.
Sure.
It's very intact. It's been described as the most intact slave ship ever found. To dig it up, we would build a cofferdam around it, suck the water out, and then you're working in an archaeological site. You know, you're not in scuba gear. You're in a hole in the water, basically.
Right.
And so they would take the ship apart and pull it up in pieces. And then to preserve it, the way you do that is you basically impregnate it with like a plastic resin, so that then it's impervious to decay after that.
Yeah.
And that process takes a long time. They heat it, and it's this whole, they know how to do it.
Sure.
But there's nothing about the condition of the ship that prevents it from being dug up. It's just a question of money and will.
Yeah.
That's all it boils down to.
I get it. Let me close in these last 2 minutes with, as best you can, top line for us, how it feels to hear, to read these first-person accounts of those who survived this horrific ordeal into the 1930s.
I would encourage everybody to read Barracoon and listen to 87-year-old Cujo Lewis telling the story of his capture, talking about telling his captors that, please let me go, I need to go find my mom. And he says, but they had no ears for crying. He breaks down in tears over and over as he tells Zora Neale Hurston these stories 80 years later after the fact. The raw pain that he and the others felt, their lifelong desire to return to Africa, there's nothing more potent in the historical record to convey what that was like for the millions of people that it happened to. And one of the forgotten things is to capture the 12 million people who were sold, they killed 20 to 40 million people in Africa in the battles.
Yeah. No.
And it's just, it's one of those human costs that we're still struggling to understand how big it was and how destructive it was for Africa and how much Africa deserves the world's attention and help to get back on its feet from this horrific, epic thing that lasted 400 years.
It is a sobering story, and we talk about what happened to those who were caught and enslaved, of course. We talk about those who were at the bottom of the Atlantic who didn't make the trip. We never talk about those that Ben just mentioned who were killed in the process of trying to capture those who were, in fact, put on those ships like the Clotilda and brought to these parts. It's an amazing story, and the story of Clotilda is told as only Ben Raines can tell it. The book is called The Last Slave Ship, the true story of how Clotilda was found, her descendants, and an extraordinary reckoning. I hope in the coming months and years we'll see somebody do the right thing in Alabama and get this ship raised so that we can all appreciate and wrestle with the story that it tells. Ben, I'm out of time for now. Thank you for your work and witness. Good to have you back on this program, sir. Thanks for the update. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me, and I'm a young Michael guy myself.
There you go. I love that. I got 2 versus how many, I don't know. More of Tavis, Smiley, when we come forward.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.